Hello and welcome back to the Schooner Pod. I'm Bobby Howard. With me today, we've got Ty Lee. And Ty, annually, you and I do have a tradition of previewing the Army-Navy game, which is obviously just a massive spectacle in American sport. One of the best things in college football. And this year's a little more interesting, a little different, mainly because the Oklahoma Sooners and the Navy Midshipmen are going to play in the Armed Forces Bowl. This is kind of a crazy deal. This is the second time OU's faced Army, or sorry, not Army, but Navy. And it's, I don't know, for me, I think it's cool because I think Service Academy football is interesting and the history and all of that. But for you, it's interesting because you're also a Navy fan. You fit in that kind of dual fandomship, and I know we make jokes all the time about lifelong Oregon Duck / Arizona State / blah 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 fan, but you're legitimately a Navy fan.
Yeah, that's true. I am. They are very much my number two team, almost a co-number one in that they we just have never played them, so I've never had to worry about it, and obviously I didn't go there, so that's what kind of bumps it just slightly below OU on the scale. But yeah, this was certainly surprising. So we'll have a fuller preview with Jameson when it comes to bowl time to actually preview this game. But Bobby and I figured that getting into the Army-Navy game is, of course, going to get into a little bit of OU stuff as well. So we just decided to get in front of that, and we'll be talking OU-Navy. This was a surprise matchup. For me as well. When this was announced, I was out at the movies the other day and came out and was really confused because I don't think anyone was sort of predicting this matchup. So that was really surprising. And we'll have a whole nother show either later in the week or next week where we will get Boat and Blake on and we will talk some of these bowl matchups because we certainly have some question marks about some of these matchups for sure and how entertaining they may or may not be.
Yeah, we kind of thought for a while we might be getting Boat and Blake's TCU team in a Liberty Bowl. Instead, we get to play at his stomping grounds at Amon G. Carter Stadium. And look, I got to be honest, a little bit of a bleary result location-wise. 11 a.m. kickoff on a Friday in not exactly the warmest weather in Fort Worth. In late December. But I think to me, and I know there are some fans who are pretty out on this, our good friend of the pod, Brady Trantham, pretty down on this from Through the Keyhole. But to me, I think this is just really, I think it's exciting. I think the players probably don't love the idea of playing triple option football. Like that makes prep interesting. But
they should have won more games.
Exactly. Win more games. You can't be concerned about making a bowl game and then get upset when you're stuck in the Armed Forces Bowl versus Navy. You just got to be cool with it.
Yeah. No, this will certainly be an interesting matchup with OU. Navy currently sitting at number 8 in run offense. OU, I think, is 30-something in run defense, 30-something or 16. That I read that in my pregame prep, and then I didn't put it in my notes. But I know that Navy is the number 8 run offense. So it will certainly be a very, very interesting matchup when we get into it, particularly because with Navy, you're looking at a school where there just aren't going to be opt-outs and there really aren't going to be people portaling either. So a very full Navy team that's going to have a lot to play for. And as we see with this OU team, already starting to see some casualties to the portal, particularly so.
Yeah, and certainly there's going to be some opt-outs for the NFL draft as well. You can't imagine Danny Stutzman is gearing up for one last run against Navy, even though he probably can set a tackle record. Current tackle record set by Kenneth Murray in that Army game in 2018, by the way. So
yeah, it would be interesting. That's certainly a big question mark with Stutzman, especially because he has so much more to play for at the moment. Obviously has been a guy that has always put OU before himself in his career, which has been really impressive for someone that truly has options. But yeah, I think this would be a big question mark because if he were to play, he would be relied upon pretty heavily in this game, which of course equates to much more risk for himself for injury and everything else. So that will be a really big question mark. I'm sure I know what side his agent is on in this one, but we'll see what that decision is when it comes.
For sure. Yeah, 1982 saying this is going to be a huge test to see if the replacements can stop the run, which certainly for sure. So I want to ask, your reaction. Obviously, you walk out of the theater, see on your phone that it's OU Navy. Didn't expect it. Are you happy to see your two favorite teams play? Is it like a conflict? Do you not like that one of them's going to have to lose? What are your thoughts on this?
No, I'm kind of torn. I've said this. I know we've been heavy on the OU hate this year. I don't want to poke at you anymore, but to me, this is kind of a win because I can, with a relatively clean conscience, I'm not even going to try this. I'm so tongue twisted right now. I can get an OU loss because I've long said that while there's no bigger OU lover, there's also no bigger OU hater than me. So we'll see. I don't know. I'm going to be just happy this is one where, I'll just be watching as a fan of the sport, cheering on, individual players and coaches. So.
Yeah, I feel like, to me, I know you're definitely given the neutral vibe about this, but I just know if OU loses to Navy, every single time, like from here on out, we got to get rid of Brent Venables, or else every time you bring up Brent Venables, he'll be like, Brent Venables, who lost to my midshipmen, by the way.
Yes. Well, we should. Yeah. 1982 brought up a good thing. I know, I think the Oklahoman ran an article about it a day or two ago, but Navy's current head coach, Brian Newberry, is actually from Oklahoma City and grew up in Moore, grew up a massive, massive OU fan. And actually talks about Barry Switzer as being his motivation to get into coaching. So if we lose, I will, of course, be championing bringing Brian Newberry to OU.
I love it. Love it for sure. So I'm excited to talk more about the game as it comes down. Obviously, a lot of pieces still to fall into place. It was hard to pick a guy for the thumbnail for this one because I just went with Michael Hawkins Jr. because at this point you don't know who will be playing, who won't be playing, who will be on the roster at that point. So very interested to see what happens there. But overall, I'm actually kind of excited about this. Maybe I'm a bit of a sicko. Maybe I just love OU football. But Navy's a cool program. This game hasn't been played much at all, as I mentioned. Only meeting was in 1960. Navy won by a score of 10-0. So yeah, the Sooners can score their first point against the Midshipmen.
Yeah, I think in conclusion, before we jump into actual Army-Navy, I think particularly with OU's opt-outs and some of the other things that we're seeing, the way OU's developing, this should be a very interesting game. It's going to be a game that's going to run through, pun intended, both quarterbacks, and should be, with a little bit of depletion on OU's defensive side, should be a fairly competitive game, I think. So that'll be really, really interesting to watch. It could be one of the more fun bowl games to watch if you're not a fan of either team, because, like I said before, there's some of these matchups are rough to get excited about. I am not looking forward to many of these matchups. They are just not exciting whatsoever. This one should get some eyeballs, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think the environment will be good. OU announced today they've already sold out their allotment for season ticket holders, which is really impressive. Obviously, Navy always travels. That's a nationwide, if not global, fan base right there. Given so many people's ties to, if not the Naval Academy, the United States Navy and Marine Corps. So it's going to be, I think, a fun environment. A lot of people in Fort Worth, a lot of people making the drive down, easy trip. So I don't think it's as bad as people say. Obviously, you're Oklahoma. You don't want to be 6-6 and playing in the Armed Forces Bowl overall. But if you're, it's better. It's better than Birmingham or Mobile. I'm just saying. So I personally find it fun. Better than playing a bad American team. It should be interesting. Should be a good time. So definitely looking forward to talking about that more in depth. But as we said earlier, Navy's got another game, and it's a big one, of course. Army-Navy coming up this weekend. It's in, I believe, DC this year. Or where is it again, Ty? I'm trying to remember.
I'm completely blanking. So this game I traditionally played in Philadelphia, almost always. It's been played in DC. It's been played in it's been played in the Rose Bowl. It's been played in Philadelphia, like I said, and in the New York area. It is going to be played in the DC area this year. It's at let me pull it up. Where are they playing? Oh, at Northwest Stadium. So they're playing at the Commander Stadium this year. So that'll be, I think, last time they played in DC was 2020, maybe 2019, something like that. So it's been played sort of a bunch of different places. Philadelphia, like I said, the traditional home, because it's fairly equal distance between the Baltimore, D.C. area, Annapolis, and then the West Point, sort of a couple hours north of New York City, West Point. So, but it should be an exciting matchup. I always start when we do this podcast with my sort of little pitch for the game. This is a tremendously historical game in the context of college football. This is the game that introduced things like the helmet. In 1893, Navy rolled out with a few players wearing the first ever football helmets, period, let alone in college football. This is the game that introduced instant replay to major football, so NFL or college football in the 1963 game. This is a game that's been attended by 10 different presidents, a total of 23 times. This is the only game where astronauts have played on both sides of the football. So there's a ton of, obviously, tie-ins. There's been Heisman's on sides. There's been national championships, implications in this game earlier in its history. Obviously, not too much lately, but this is a game that does have a lot of history, and this year is the best that both of these teams have been. Navy, obviously, an inexplicable, inexcusable loss to Rice earlier in the season, and then a pretty tragic loss against Tulane when starting quarterback went down. Army, obviously, on a tremendous season. If you tuned into the weekend spread last week, I was kind of down on them against Tulane in their conference championship, and they handled business there. So Army has been a very good team. It's been a very good program under head coach Jeff Monken. If you're an OU fan, obviously, who can forget that, was it 2017, Bobby?
2018.
2018, that it was on like pay-per-view and people were pirating the streams everywhere, and Army almost beat us in Norman. Kenneth Murray had like 75 tackles or something insane in that game.
Yeah, most people watched that game via someone's Twitch stream where you could see their foot in the shot. It was one of the great moments.
There was no audio. The guy was asking to go pee the whole time.
One of the great moments.
That's actually how I watched it, because I was in North Carolina at the time. So.
Yeah, that was back in the old pay-per-view days. So lots changed. Lots changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but this should be an exciting matchup.
For sure. And I mean, it feels like a year where, at various points, obviously, both of these teams are riding high. There were talks for a period of time that, this could be an American Conference Championship game where you get an Army-Navy, like two Army-Navies back-to-back, which would have been really interesting to say the least. But yeah, I mean, Navy, even though they've kind of curtailed a little bit towards the, back half of the season, with the Horvath injury, they're still dangerous. They run the triple option, of course. They do have a couple wrinkles in there that make them a little bit more unique than standard Navy teams. But like you said, this Army team, outside of getting the doors blown off them by Notre Dame a couple weeks ago, has been really, really solid. So I think this is one where typically you have years where one team's down, the other is not. You'll see big winning streaks in this rivalry. This is as even as it's been in years. And I think it's going to be really exciting, an absolute treat for those who truly love college football and love this game.
Yeah, and as a Navy fan, I'm very excited. Unfortunately, a couple years ago, we had to part ways with longtime head coach Ken Niumatalolo, who is on, doing great things now, but I think it was time for a change, and in the athletic department certainly felt it was time for a change. So it'll be really exciting to see how Brian Newberry performs against this Army team this year, because again, not enough good things can be said about Army head coach Jeff Monken and what he's done with that program. You have to remember that for the longest time, since 2001, there was almost a 15-year stretch where Army was just not competitive whatsoever in this game. Navy just dominated the series for most of the 21st century. until, Jeff came in and really started to turn things around. And that was kind of I think one of the bigger driving factors is Army, on a couple of game win streak now, and it hasn't really been any Navy domination as of late. So that's certainly what the goalpost is for Navy. We'll preview both teams, but I'll just go ahead and roll into it's going to be a bit of a Navy bias. But like Bobby's been saying, Navy is going to be led by quarterback Blake Hovarth. Did go down early against Tulane. Was kind of questionable against ECU. Did not play last week. Has obviously a couple weeks to rest now, so should be back. No sort of significant injuries. Sounds like it was a big hit, and then they just kind of reported his back spasms, and he's been able to exercise and practice through. So he is expected to play in Army Navy, and then obviously Army Navy will show us for the bowl game against OU later. But Hovarth again leading this number 8 in the nation run attack. Hovarth himself is sitting just under 900 yards with, Army Navy, and then with the OU game could certainly be 1,000-yard rusher on the year. And he's sitting at 13 touchdowns currently. And he's got about 10 passing attempts per game, about 59% completion ratio. But one of the big things to look out for is explosive plays from the air. And we'll talk about this with Army too, but Navy's top 7 receivers that all have registered multiple catches all average over 11 yards per catch. A lot of the top ones are averaging in the 20s. So it's going to be this offense is very much, like you said, a little bit different from what you might expect from service academies of past. It's going to be those runs, those body shots, those body punches, essentially, and then you're going to get that big hook, that big uppercut, to the jaw, and that's going to be your pass. That they sort of go for those knockout blows. So that'll be really interesting to see how this plays in with OU's defense, obviously, and then with Army's as well. Talk about Army here in a second, but they kind of have a similar thing as well. And then I have down here, one of the bigger things to look out for Navy is very inconsistent kicking. As good as Army's been in years past, this is traditionally a one-score game. So it could potentially come down to a kick. And Navy has been very inconsistent kicking, about 57% on the year for field goals, and the long is a 46, but they're only 50% if it's over 30 yards. So not a tremendous kicking program, this Navy team this year.
Special teams in a game like this are so tremendously important. These games, I feel like especially in recent years, regardless of how either team has been doing, always tend to be a bit close. The style of play lends to, clocks getting run down quick, long drives, and you really win these type of games in the margins. So Navy, if you say they have a bad kicking game, that immediately kind of springs a little bit of concern in my eyes, because you're going to have to kind of dot your P's and, dot your P's. God, you don't dot P's, but you get the point. You have to make sure you mind your P's and Q's. You gotta make sure to. Yeah, and as we know from Texas this past weekend, missed field goals could be a backbreaker.
Yeah, and while we're on the topic of field goals, Army's kicking about 88% on the year, but their season long is only 39, and if it's over 30, they basically don't even attempt it. So it is certainly a game that I have down here in my notes for the podcast that both teams are looking for this not to be a kick to win it, because you're probably looking at overtime if you have an over 30-yard kick. If you have anything longer than like an extra point kick to win it, we're probably going to overtime. So that will certainly be interesting to see how that plays out. But yeah, inconsistent special teams for both of these teams.
For sure. Now let's talk a little bit more about the Army side of things here, Ty. I know you obviously don't watch them as much as the Navy, but you always got to keep an eye on your rivals. We all know that over here at the Schooner Pod. What have you seen out of Army this year? I know I've personally been impressed by some of their play this season. I know their strength of schedule hasn't quite been what Navy's has been. They kind of got a little bit of an easy run, but obviously very impressive win against Tulane. You've seen them go on these just marathon drives. What is it about the Black Knights that make them a pretty formidable opponent?
Yeah, for Army, a lot of people, and this is what I've seen, a lot of people will tell you it's all about quarterback Bryson Daly. And the stats speak for themselves. He is leading the FBS in touchdowns for the year. He's at 29 right now. Certainly, barring any injuries, knock on wood and all that, will definitely, get above that with the Navy and then with their bowl game. He's also the number 4 rusher in yards, sitting at about 1,500 right now. But Army's number 2 rusher, who is their running back, whose name is Kanye Udo, is just over 100. Not over 100,000 yards. That would be insane. He's just over 1,000 yards at 1,064 right now with another 10 touchdowns on the ground. So it's an attack that's much more balanced than Navy. Navy, when you look at their same numbers, Hovarth obviously missed 2 games. Navy has a very competent backup quarterback in Braxton Woodson, but Hovarth on the ground, like we said, 900 yards, 13 touchdowns. You're looking at, what is that, 600 more yards from Bryson Daly and significantly more touchdowns. Navy's number 2 rusher, though, only has just under 500 yards and 7 touchdowns. So Army, obviously a much more balanced attack if you have 2 over 1,000-yard rushers and 2 guys with double-digit touchdowns on the ground. And then, like I kind of alluded to when we were talking about Navy, watch out for those explosive plays from the air. They might not be those super impressive, the ball is in the air for 50 yards, sort of big, deep bomb passes that you see in like the Texas-Georgia game. But top 5 receivers for Army with multiple catches are all averaging double digits yard per catch. And again, several in the 20s. And again, that's a factor, not a factor of, I don't know why I can't speak today. But that's one of those offenses where they're going to grind you down. They're going to pull you into the box, and then they're going to have a guy just outside that, the passes in the air for 10 yards or so, but then he breaks off for a significant chunk play. And that's what you're going to see from both of these teams. And that's certainly something that they both kind of keep in their playbook. Now that they're in the same conference, people can prepare for it a little bit. Obviously, Notre Dame plays both teams as much as they can. So people can prepare for it a little bit, but it'll be very interesting to see both of these offenses with relatively the same playbook. Army is a little more triple option heavy, if that makes sense. But Navy, I think, is a little, like you said, it's just a little different. You know it when you see it. It's sort of the new wave of Service Academy offense, but it certainly will be very interesting to see how these offenses match up and how these defenses match up, because like you said, it's going to be a quick game. I think it's going to be a lot of clock running, ball on the ground, getting churned along, but it will certainly be interesting because both of these defenses are used to, in practice, seeing what they're going to see from these offenses. So very, very exciting.
Absolutely. And obviously these two teams, I don't want to say they only focus on Army Navy, because they do, Army, if you look at, I think their list of goals for the season were number 1, do your job. And, number 2, I can't remember what number 2 was. It was essentially do your job. And then you have their schedule, and every opponent on the slate was the Army. They obviously, Army obviously, they focus on everything. I know Navy does as well, but this is a game that is just so woven. They're woven together. You end workouts saying, beat Army or beat Navy, depending on what side you're on. This is a game that is, it's bigger than just another one on your schedule, to say the least. So I'm very intrigued to see how they handle it, how they play. This is going to be probably the best offensively you can play against either of these teams usually comes to this game, because you know the other so well. So I'm intrigued to see how it goes. Any other bits about the ball game itself from an X's and O's standpoint that we should be aware of?
No, I think, again, I like to conclude it how I start, with sort of a sales pitch for it, because I do understand those fans who say, oh, this isn't that entertaining of a game. It's always very, very exciting to see those air raid versus air raid, that college Patrick Mahomes versus Baker Mayfield style matchup where you're just absolutely airing it out and every play looks like a highlight play. But this is, if you don't watch it or you haven't watched it in a couple years or don't think you'll watch it, it's certainly worth I think, the time. One, it's the only game on, so what else are you going to go do? But it should be exciting. And if you're a fan of the sport, I think in years past I've referenced it as sort of a peek back towards what football used to look like. Army claims that they had the first ever forward pass in a game. I think that's sort of a disputed claim. I know there's a few other places that argue it, but Army has like a little spot on campus marked on one of their drill fields where they used to play games, marked as like the spot where the first ever forward pass was thrown and things like that. But it's a very, very exciting game. I think tons of tradition. The game day and the pregame shows should be interesting. And like you said, it's so deeply ingrained. This is the only game, I would argue, obviously the Air Force Academy exists, but one of the only games in major FBS football where you can look at, this is the only game where you can look at two teams that are this good and this nationally relevant, like a conference champion versus a number 2 in their conference. Yeah, it's group of 5, but Army was in the playoff talk, before that loss to Notre Dame. So this is the only game where you can see two teams that are this good, that were both in the top 25 this year, where you truly have student athletes who are students first and then also athletes. And 100% of both student bodies will be in attendance. It's going to be a very, very exciting matchup. So I always like to give a little sales pitch for it. Give it a try if you haven't watched it in a few years, and you never know what's going to happen. It truly is one of those throw out the record book games. Years past, when Army has been very, very solid, say the past 5 years, Army's been very, very solid. Navy has been struggling, with head coaching turnover and finding their footing, still has been traditionally a one-score game in that time span. So this is very much same as OU Texas, same as the game, same as any other reputable rivalry. Throw out the record book. Anything can happen in this one. So very, very exciting and probably a watch to the end game.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great one. Definitely worth watching. It's more than just the pageantry. The football is also really damn good too. So definitely tune in. Okay, so obviously a big aspect of this game as well, off the field, has been the tradition of like pranks and all of that. I know it's early in the week, but have we seen anything yet on the prank end of Army Navy? I know there was a pretty good one at the at Air Force. Putting what was it? I can't remember if it was Army or Navy before their game this year in the Commander-in-Chief's trophy. They put a CH in front of the Air Force in the upper deck, spelling out Chair Force, which is a pretty damn good dig. So any thoughts on the? I don't know. Have there been any pranks about this one yet?
Yeah, that was Army a little bit earlier in the year. That was actually some Army students. They do an exchange program with a few dozen from each school, rotate around each semester. So that was Air Force Academy students that were there on loan from West Point that went ahead and did that. But yeah, there's been some wild shenanigans in years past with stealing the goats from Navy and the donkeys from Army and all sorts of assorted kidnappings of humans and other things like that. It's been something that's been sort of heavily discouraged as of late. I'm sure there's plenty of social media hijinks, but no sort of big significant hijinks to report as of right now. So yeah, we are a little early in the week, so maybe there'll be some stuff when they get down to DC for the game, or maybe there's some stuff that's being plotted to be executed right now. But yeah, traditionally a ton of very significant, the type of hijinks that you would hear about from sort of back in the day with, OU Texas and other rivalries are still very much alive and well in this game, again, as part of the tradition.
Which is just awesome. A part of the tradition that has become, tradition in recent years has been the uniforms, which, it's kind of one of the funnier parts about this game is it's one of the most tradition-rich games, but both teams wear alternates every single year. And I know you're normally on the side of alternates are bad, but I know that's not the case with this one because both teams usually roll out just some incredible alts. So let's look at the uniforms and talk through them a bit. Ty, who do we want to start with first?
So while you pull this up, Bobby, for the viewers, if you're listening on podcast, go ahead and look them up yourself. But there's another big rivalry that we have to talk about in the uniforms. Navy is an Under Armour school and Army is a Nike school. So this is big corporate implications on the public opinion of these uniforms each year. Navy has long been a fan of the airbrushed, the actual hand-painted helmets, not just stickers, a lot of the time that we'll see with the ones this year. But yeah, I have been negative of alts in the past when I think they're used as a recruiting tool to just kind of be flashy and sell merchandise or entice recruits or whatever. But when you bring alts like Army and Navy do that are just every fiber of them is dripped in tradition and meaning, it's hard to hate that. So I suppose we should start with Army since they are the quote unquote home team this year, wearing the all black.
Yeah, absolutely. So very interesting look here, Ty. Army in the all blacks here with a bit of a bespeckled white on the yoke of the shoulder as well as on the helmets. Can you give us a background behind Army's uniforms this year?
Yeah, so Army, of course, called the Black Knights. Something that Nike has always sought to do is to include sort of that as much black as they can or a darker theme when they do have the home game position in this game. So Army went with all black this year. These uniforms are honoring the 101st Airborne Division, who you can see the patch right there on the left shoulder of this player, and black is one of their colors of that division, so that tracks as well. And these uniforms are specifically honoring the Battle of Bastogne, which was during the end of 1944, early 1945 in the Ardennes Forest, when the Germans launched sort of their last major counterattack on the Western Front to counter the Allied advance. And the 101st Airborne Division got cut off and was surrounded for several weeks in and around the Ardennes Forest area and held out on their own. So these uniforms honoring that, tons of, again, history and insignia, the different regiments and battalions and sub-organizations within the division would wear, what do they call it, card suits, I guess, on their helmets. So
yeah.
The clubs, the spades, the hearts, on their helmets would indicate these are a little plain. They would also have little dots and dashes around the suit that would indicate different subdivisions that you were in within that regiment. And you can see the jump wing insignia on the front of the face mask there as well. So just again dripping in history and meaning on every inch of these uniforms. And I don't know, they're very, very solid. But when we get to Navy's, these are, I don't know. Navy's some of my favorites, but Army, again, with a very, very solid. I don't think they've ever really missed. This is a great one to go back and just look at Army Navy uniforms throughout the years and go back even 20 years. It's just so cool what they've done. Army's got some weird ones because they've leaned into the camouflage thing a little too much sometimes. And I think like overdoing camouflage on sports uniforms looks a little weird, but very, very, very solid uniforms. Some of the Navy fans and Navy trolls online, and I love this one too, have sort of taken to calling them the dandruff uniforms because they do sort of look like maybe the Army player could have pretty extreme dandruff. And if you buy any of the merchandise and you don't have the helmet to go with it, it could also certainly maybe look like that.
Oh yeah, that would look bad with just the jersey. Yeah. I think that's an unfortunate downside to it because I actually love those uniforms. I think they're cool, simple, clean, great story to them. But the person who called him the dandruff, just one good meme just could ruin a good uni.
Just one. So. Who would win? Nike versus one Instagram comment.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay, so talked about the Army. Let's talk about Navies. So you mentioned they're pretty cool, and I gotta agree. These are pretty damn cool, Ty.
Yeah, so Navy wearing what they're calling the Fear the Bones. It is obviously a skull and crossbone design that is honoring a series of Navy fighter squadrons that have worn the skull and crossbones. Without getting into it too much, sort of the way that the Navy and the Marine Corps do their squadron histories. Sometimes squadrons can be reestablished and disestablished with different numbers, and there's a sort of a command that deals with the official passing of lineage. So you get to take on the history. Sort of think when a sports team moves cities and they determine whether or not they're going to take that official history, quote unquote, with them or not. So the skull and crossbones, the Jolly Rogers, as they're called, was originally during World War II Fighting Squadron 17, then became a Fighter Squadron 61, then Fighter Squadron 84, and now Fighter Attack Squadron or Strike Fighter Squadron 103, VFA 103, is the bonesman that you see, the Super Hornet, the jet from Top Gun Maverick behind him, with the big skull and crossbones on the tail, twin tails of the jet. And then on the uniform itself, like we said, every one of these is hand painted, custom airbrushed, and hand painted on the helmets. They feature that tail insignia on the helmets, and then on the shoulders. The shoulders on the side feature 9 chevron designs, one for each different type model series of aircraft that the squadron has flown in its history, starting from the World War II, the F-4U Corsair, all the way up to, again, in the background of the photos, the Super Hornet that is, the jet from Top Gun Maverick. Interestingly enough, it's been a squadron because of its skull and crossbones design, obviously features really well in media and in film. So you see them flying the F-14 Tomcat in a movie that I really love called Final Countdown from the 80s, a really cheesy movie where an aircraft carrier goes back in time to the day before Pearl Harbor, and they have this massive ethical dilemma of whether or not to intervene or not, and potentially change history. And it has Martin Sheen in it. It has a bunch of big actors. It's really cheesy, but it's definitely worth a watch. And then also,
that's so intriguing.
Disney's Planes also features. I guess it's supposed to be the original Fighting Squadron 17. I don't know what the character's name is, but the old warbird is depicted with the skull and crossbones insignia, and there's a very intense, for a G-rated Disney movie, flashback battle scene of them attacking presumably Japanese ships. Have you never seen Disney's Planes, Bobby?
No, I have not seen Disney's Planes.
Yes.
What in the world?
World War II does occur in the Cars Planes universe.
Oh my God.
So it's not just implied, it's actually shown. So yeah, there's a very intense scene where it's depicted as, it is canon that the Jolly Rogers also exist in the Disney universe.
Oh my God.
Fight Japanese cars and boats and planes.
Wow. Yeah, the implication.
It's not implications. It's just straight up shown.
Well, that just means straight up that World War II existed in cars, which, that you could, I don't, that, I'm just saying, that implies
don't ask your Mercedes what it was doing in the.
Oh yeah, no. That implies the existence of Cars Hitler. I'm just saying, we're gonna move on.
We're 30 minutes in. We are off the rails.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. So I think without a doubt, Navy wins the uniform race here. This is just great.
Yeah, I think. Obviously, I'm very, very biased, but I have been negative of the airbrushed helmets in the past. They did a Blue Angels one year that I thought was a little too cartoonishy on the helmets. They did one year where every position group was a different type of ship that the idea maybe made sense, but not in practice. But these helmets, I think, are gorgeous. They're meant to depict sort of a 1980s style fighter pilot helmet. I'm sure maybe someone in the comments will know it's like a HGU 65, something like that, 84, some sort of number that follows that denotes what type of helmet it is. But the jersey itself translates so well to jersey sales, I think. And then just the colors, like that deep navy blue and black and yellow and the white and silvers just translates so well to a uniform.
Well, and I don't know what the forecast is, if there's any chance of snow. If there is snow for that uniform's going to look awesome. And hell, Army's is too. And I feel like snow games are really when these just pop the best. So I don't
Yeah,
know
we've
if
had
that's
some
even
good foggy games
Fog's good.
as well
Fog's great.
sometimes. So that'd be really cool.
Yeah, Army Navy's at its aesthetically worst whenever it's sunny. It needs to be a little bit. It needs to be a little bit like muggy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It looks good. Having both the cadets and the midshipmen fully dressed out and everything. It looks like it needs to be cold. It looks like it needs to be cold.
It
So
does. It has. I feel like all like old school style football, just in your mind, just needs to be like sort of a dreary, cold, late fall, early winter game. To me, it's so weird to watch any Big Ten game prior to like the second half of November because the weather just doesn't make sense. I'm like this. This is not what it's supposed to look like when Michigan is playing football. Like the fans are in t-shirts. That's not right. And Army Navy is very much the same way. I feel the same when I watch like Ivy League games, and that's certainly Army Navy is seeing both of these teams play. It's kind of what's going on. These people need to be in large fur coats.
Ivy League too. It's like, wait a second, you're allowed to have real helmets. You're not going out there in the leathers. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah. I will say though, I'm a big proponent of this game. I don't think it could ever happen now in the modern media landscape, and it only happened once because the city of Pasadena was willing to pay for all of the students and staffs to travel and stuff. But I would love for this to be played in the Rose Bowl again as a one-off. I think it was '83. It was in the early '80s when it was played there last, and that would be really cool if they could do some sort of, I don't know, theme it for the bright California sunshine. That'd be a really cool matchup. But
yeah, you could definitely do something there for sure. Yeah, that would be awesome. I'm all for that. Best setting in college football. With what probably the best traditional matchup you got. That'd be really cool to see that again in more modern times. But all right, anything else from Army Navy before we wrap this show up?
no, I will say obviously go Navy, beat Army, but I'm biased. That's going to be my pick, but we will see. From this game, what both of these teams really are. I think, especially after last week with Army, we have a good idea based on their performance against Tulane. Navy, again, terrible loss of Hovarth against Tulane resulted in a 35-0 loss to that same team that Army sort of handled business with. But we'll be able to get a lot for the bowl game, based on this, because again, while Navy's had technically the tougher strength of schedule, really the only meaningful teams that both of these teams have played is Notre Dame and Tulane. And, Navy lost to both. Army handled one and they lost to Notre Dame. Basically, they looked identical to Navy. And that one, the score and the differential was pretty much the same as well. Really, the big difference is Navy had some standout performances. It's like Memphis. I want to say Maryland over and over, but Memphis and some stuff like that. So we'll be able to learn a lot. And if you're an OU fan, I guess double, triple, I've forgotten how many reasons I've given to watch this game, but we'll see double, triple, whatever reasons to watch to get that sort of preview of your new upcoming opponent.
Absolutely. It's really rare to get, to have your bowl opponent matched up or like ahead of time and you get to see a game in between. So definitely worth a watch if you're a Sooner fan. If you're a fan of anyone, definitely worth a watch. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to watching it. So I don't know. The line is Army -6.5. I'm gonna go Army. One, love a good dissenting opinion to be a little opposite. But my grandfather was in the Army, so I've always kind of trended towards Army. So I don't know. I'm going to go with the Black Knights on this one. They've looked great all season long. I don't know if they're going to cover. In fact, I'm probably going to go Navy to cover, but Army to win. So that's my thought on it. I think it's going to be a great game. Truly, these two programs are at a zenith that we haven't seen in a while. So 100% worth your time to watch this ball game. So
yeah, obviously, if you're watching live, you're going to say, "Why did he just say this?" But we are recording on Monday. So I would expect that one to probably move over a touchdown in favor of Army just because they've had, they have that number next to their name. They're now the conference champions, and they've had that big PR bump. People have rightfully recognized because of years and years of work what Jeff Monken has done there. I've said it multiple times this pod, but it cannot be said enough. It's so impressive, and he's had so many other offers to go other places, and it's really cool to see what he's established there. But I would not be surprised if the line moved over a touchdown in Army's favor. But I will, of course, be taking Navy outright. And 6.5, probably a little worrisome because this is probably going to be a touchdown game. But go ahead and give me the Midshipmen plus 6.5 in this one.
All right, I like it. All right, Ty, thank you for all of your knowledge, all of your insight on this game. Always fun talking. Definitely a little bit more fun than usual, given that the Sooners are about to play your Midshipmen. But looking forward to talking about that game more in depth as time goes on. So
yeah.
Good deal.
And we will be continuing the weekend spread for those listening and watching. We'll be picking all the bowl matchups, so you will have plenty more of Bowden Blake and Jameson. We'll sort of get into the final tally. I know we kind of talked about it last week, but see how we all ended up with the win-loss record. None of it is too impressive.
Hey, you were great. You had a season for the ages, Ty. You really did.
Yeah, I finished not as great as I wanted to be, but we'll get into.
You wanted to finish 500. You finished too good. You finished ahead of where you wanted.
But we'll get into all the bowl matchups, and like we said, we will preview much more in depth when we get Jameson back. How Navy actually matches up with this OU team, especially as OU's roster a little bit in flux right now. Now that the portal season is kind of opening, so very, very excited to see. I would love to see a Michael Hawkins like we talked about, but there'll be plenty of that. And, I'll get a chance to again, admonish all of the Timothée Chalamet not knowers for saying that he would be bad on game day, because he was easily the best guest picker all year. So I think that's about all I have for this one. Go Navy, beat Army.
All right. Sounds good, Ty. Well, for me and Ty, this has been the Schooner Pod. We'll see y'all next time. Have a good one, everybody.